I have this Centurion clock, 35 day, that it decides to tick when it wants to or stops. And I think I know what it is, but I'm not positive. But right now it's running. It might run for 2 or 3 days and stop. It does have the nice decal on the door, kind of like the one next to it. You can see that better or not. Anyway, it does have the headboard on it. You can see on this one it's got a lower one. This one here, there's a place for it, but it's missing. And so I think I'm going to tear this thing apart and see what's going on. I see it does have a defect in here, as in something probably hit it. And you can kind of tell the wood shapes are cracking a little bit in here. See in that light. And these clocks, like this one here, there's a chance, because I can see the wood grain, it might be more of a wood clock compared to this one. I do believe is not real wood. It's painted, or not painted, like a paper on there. But just same, let's take this clock apart and see what we can come up with. So on this clock inside here is a place so you can turn the gong off. You click this over to the side and it'll lift the gong, so you'll hear it operate inside but it won't hit. And otherwise back over and it's back to the gong. And laying down it's not going to hit. But again, to adjust your gong so it's not so loud or whatever, if you have a smaller house, this rod needs to be bent just a little bit further away from where it hits here so it doesn't make such a loud gong to it. So anyway, let me go ahead and take these 3 screws out, and I might go ahead and take this board off also to get in there to clean the case itself. And obviously we're going to take these hands off too. So you can see I got the board out too, and I see nuts in here, so that means the bolts come clear up through the case to hold this on. You can see it is wound all the way, so there's no reason, let's just say, that this thing just stops ticking when it wants to. So let me get this undone out of here, and maybe we'll take a little bit closer look to it. You do notice this here isn't real shiny. It's probably a foreign works or whatever, but we'll find out pretty quick. And this does feel like it does have a little bit of grime feel to it, so it might be just that the clock's dirty. And these things, actually these have on top they have that little bit of a grease feel to them, but they still might need cleaned up too. So right at the moment I don't see any markings. There is a 694, so my wildest guess would be a 6 month, and this is a 94 clock. I think I'll just let these down because at the moment I don't really see too much, but I already know I'm gonna have to clean it. This here is a spring that goes to this here, which is actually the part of the ratchet. So I'll have to lift this up after I get the dewinding tool, the letdown tool. See which one fits best. So they do have several types of the letdown tools. This one here is a permanent, and I don't know if you can see that or not. It says 8 there for, or 8 there for size 8. There's a, that looks like a C to me. So, oh, that's not a, but there's a B. Anyway, all I do is I just fit it on to see which one fits the tightest. But they have many different designs. This one here is one that's changeable. Different size there. Here it says 7 and 8. And so, there, like I say, there's different designs you can buy if you want to get into these clock letdowns. And when you're doing this, even using these, you should be careful. But you can let them down at the key, but like I say, there's many a times where that key will just kind of get away from you because you only take it about a half a turn, if that, and then release or let that clicker go back on so you can get another grip and then release again. On this, I can, once I release the clicker, I can let it keep going. All you do is wind it up a little bit to get the clicker released. Trying to be very careful. So this is a part of the dangerous job here. Now you can see what's odd about this. See how it's coming out instead of unwinding here? That's telling me that this is pretty dirty and not sliding very well. Now there could be another reason besides maybe being dirty, is this clock was never let to wind down all the way, or it could be in time these things from being wound up so much that they lose their spring, and it's good to get these things stretched out as far as they can go. This normally hits the case, and then it can't open up all the way, so this here will relax the spring and help it out of re-stretching itself. And so this is probably the reason why this clock will tick sometimes and other times it doesn't. There we go, Mickey Mouse. Now besides this saying 694, right here it does say made in Korea, I do believe. Yeah. And you can already tell, like I say, this is dull looking. The Korean works, they never did shine them up, and I can bet you money if this hasn't been cleaned yet, you're going to see this film come off of this part of the works, and that's what they call the shellac or varnish, whatever it is they put on here to make them look shiny. But like I say, this clock is quite dirty, so let's get her in the bath and see what happens. Now to dry it off, I've already taken it and put it into the ammoniated clock cleaner. I rinsed it off with hot water, then I ran it through the soapy Dawn dishwash soap, got it all cleaned off, and then I rinsed it again, and now the hair dryer. Now that I got it dried, look at where all the places that you grease, or I shouldn't say grease, that you oil with clock oil. Every place, look and check out whether you have excessive wear that you're going to possibly be losing the control of the clock, we'll say. Because sometimes they won't tick at all, that kind of stuff. Make sure all these are tight in here, and which you can get in here possibly and wiggle them, but you can see pretty much whether they're wore out or not. Otherwise, you'll have to have this rebushed on the ones that are wore out. And don't forget to look at where the winders are, because those, they don't have bushings in them, but those will wear out too and get a little bit sloppy. So it's good to check each one of those. Put the oil in there, and you just want to drop in there and you want to suck it back in. This pin, I can push on it and it'll dump the oil, then you leave it sit there and it'll suck it back up. On your other pins, the cheaper ones, let me show you one of them. These are your cheaper pins where they don't do nothing, but you take the top off and they have oil in, you have to squeeze the tube. What you can do is squeeze the tube before you start the oil flowing to get the air out, but don't squeeze it all the way down, and that way, of course this comes off, that way you can set it on there and additionally squeeze it till the oil drips on there, and then let go of it and it'll suck the oil back up in through the tube and back in here. So I did add a little bit of grease here and over here and where these shafts are, and I went ahead and used a hair dryer to get it down because there's a plate down there that I'd like a little bit of grease on because these springs do drag across those plates. So what I'm going to do is wind these up a little bit, and I'll go ahead and put the grease in there also. Now, as you can see, I've got this down further, and I've already done this a couple of times, but you get it down so far and you start putting the grease on there. In fact, you can start putting grease on before, but start putting grease on there, then take your hair dryer and you can get it to go down in between. It's not all laying on top. These springs are already quite warm, so the grease is melting right in. Notice that it's right there. You don't want to force the winding any further than what it is, because in your mind you're thinking it's gonna be less. I'm gonna have to wind this clock. That's not the deal. The deal is this is a 35-day clock, and even though the spring is loose right there, this thing, whether it's a gong or whether it's a time, is going to wind down properly to the time for it to be wound up again. When it says 35-day clock, that makes it so, let's just say, on the 1st, you can wind this clock. Every time each month is on the 1st, you can wind this clock up, and so you have that 5 to 6 day leeway that's still built up in the springs. There's no sense in waiting for the clock to wind down and stop working. Wind it every 1st of the month, 3rd of the month, 30th of the month, whatever you decide. Just try to wind your clock the same time. You're done greasing this, it doesn't hurt to take the towel, because what's on top here isn't necessary. You want it down in the spring, and this is just surplus that's going to be catching your dust and whatnot. Even though this is a closed box, we just don't need that extra oil on there. This is already it's still pretty warm, but it's cooling down now, and so this grease is not necessary. You notice this clock. Now this one didn't, I think, has been cleaned before because it didn't have that shellac varnish, whatever it is they spray on here to make them shiny. And that says made in Korea right there. They're just from Korea, they're just a cheap works, and so that's just the way it is. Just because it's shiny doesn't mean it's going to be any better of a running clock necessarily. So this here needs a spring that pulls it down to make sure it goes down, because this is what counts each time it gongs. And this spring that's on here, I just tested it and it wasn't strong enough, so it's just hooked on here on the case. And what I did is I took it and I wrapped it around one more time, and now I have good spring, even with it upside down. That's going to come down and it's going to count the hour properly. Like I say, that's there's telling what hour the clock is, and this here is what counts the gong or counts the hour once this thing is ready to be tripped. Okay, I'll set the works in here. This does have the bolts that come from the back and up, so these are just nuts that sit on, come in here. That says 25, not knowing what that means or anything else. Let's set this works in here and oops. Oh, almost forgot. This here lever needs to be put on, and this lever is for shutting the gong off if you don't want it running during the nighttime. Get it down, make sure make sure the works isn't sitting on the gong, otherwise that's not going to do you too good. Okay, don't forget to test and make sure this wire that moves this is pulling back like it's supposed to and is free, so that way it can still gong, which obviously it's not going to gong until you stand the clock up. So now you can go ahead and screw the nuts on. I'm not going to worry about trying to wax inside of that because this is a very rough, it's lucky to maybe have one coat of finish on it for what I can see of it. So let me put this board on now and get the 5 screws into it and get the face plate on so I can get the dial put back on.